Hey everyone, I've noticed that many of you are enjoying the videos, but most of you haven't subscribed yet. We're super close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and your support could help us reach that milestone. If you're enjoying the content, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really makes a huge difference and helps us keep creating more awesome content. Thank you so much for watching and supporting. I always prided myself on knowing people, reading them, understanding their motives, and anticipating their moves. It's what made me a damn good real estate agent. But when it came to Kelly, my wife of 12 years, I was blind. I didn't see the cracks until they were gaping wounds, leaking poison into every corner of our lives. That morning, like so many others, started with the routine we'd settled into. I was sipping my coffee at the kitchen island, scrolling through emails, when she breezed in, hair damp from the shower, dressed for her morning yoga class. She gave me a quick smile, the same one that always felt a little too practiced these days, and grabbed her keys from the counter. "You've got that work trip next week, right?" she asked casually, glancing over her shoulder. Something about the way she said it made me pause. It was a subtle shift, something only someone close would catch. She shouldn't have known about the trip. "I just gotten the email confirmation from the office that morning." "Yeah," I replied, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. "Phoenix, just for a few days." "Oh, right," and she said, already halfway out the door, not missing a beat. "Have fun." As the door clicked shut behind her, I felt the first prick of unease. Kelly had never been one to pay much attention to my work schedule unless it impacted her directly. Her indifference had been one of the constants of our marriage, and now here she was casually mentioning a trip she shouldn't have known about. It was small, insignificant maybe, but something about it gnawed at me. I shook it off, tried to bury the feeling under the mountain of work waiting for me, but that uneasy prick became a slow burn as the day wore on. I replayed the conversation in my head, dissecting every word, every inflection. Was I being paranoid? Probably. But as I sat at my desk that afternoon, emails forgotten, my mind kept circling back to her tone, her expression. Too smooth, too rehearsed. It wasn't just the trip. Lately, everything about Kelly felt off. She'd been distant, distracted. Her phone was always glued to her hand, the screen tilting away from me whenever I was nearby. She wasn't cold exactly, but there was a hollowed-out version of her where my wife used to be. Our conversations had become stilted, the easy laughter we used to share replaced by awkward silences. Even our intimacy, what little remained, felt like a ritual she was going through out of obligation, not desire. By the time she came home that evening, the unease had solidified into something sharper. I watched her move around the kitchen, making herself a smoothie after yoga, barely acknowledging me. She was humming softly, her back to me, and I found myself studying her, trying to pinpoint when things had changed. Was it a gradual drift, or had I just not been paying attention? I wanted to ask her then, just come out with it. Why did she know about the trip? Was there something she wasn't telling me? But I held back, the words stuck in my throat. I didn't want to seem like the insecure husband, and maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was nothing, but it wasn't nothing. The next few days were a blur of routine, but that seed of doubt, once planted, grew roots. Every little thing started to feel suspicious. Kelly's absences became more frequent. Nights out with friends I didn't know, weekend yoga retreats that stretched longer than usual. Her phone, always buzzing with notifications, seemed to occupy more of her attention than I did. Whenever I asked her about it, she brushed it off with a laugh, calling me paranoid. I wasn't paranoid, at least not yet. The real blow came one night when I was working late in the office. I'd poured myself into work, hoping to drown the nagging doubts with client calls and property listings, but even that was failing. My focus drifted, and for the first time in our marriage, I started snooping. It felt wrong beneath me even, but I couldn't stop myself. Kelly had left her laptop open on the kitchen table, a rare occurrence. She was always so careful with it, always shutting it down the moment I walked into a room. That alone was enough to set off alarms in my head. I sat down, hesitating only for a second before clicking through her browser history. Most of it was benign. shopping sites, recipe blogs. But then I found something odd. A private folder tucked away deep in her documents, labeled with a random string of numbers. I clicked on it, my heart pounding. Inside were dozens of screenshots of messages, emails exchanged with someone named Nick. Nick. My pulse quickened as I scrolled through the conversations. They weren't just friendly. They were intimate, detailed. Discussions about weekends away, about plans that had been made without my knowledge. Explicit promises whispered through text. I felt sick. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring as the realization crashed over me. Kelly wasn't just cheating, she had been planning it, plotting it. Every moment she'd smiled at me, touched my hand, kissed me before bed. It had all been a lie. I should have confronted her right then. I wanted to. But something stopped me. Instead, I shut the laptop and sat there, the weight of it pressing down on me, suffocating me. I thought back over the last few months, every interaction replaying in my head like a twisted movie reel. The late nights, the sudden yoga retreats. The phone she never let out of her sight. How had I missed it? How had I let it get this far without seeing what was right in front of me? I stood up, pacing the length of the kitchen, my mind racing. Kelly's betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was deeper than that. She was taking something from me. My trust, my security, my sense of control, all of it was slipping through my fingers. I went to bed that night but didn't sleep. Kelly came home late, sliding into bed beside me like everything was fine. I listened to her breathing, even in calm, while my mind spun in circles. I knew I needed to do something, but I didn't know what. Not yet. The next morning, the unease had turned into cold resolve. I couldn't confront her. Not until I had more. I needed to know the full extent of her betrayal. So I waited. I watched. Every time she smiled at me, every kiss on the cheek, every word of reassurance, it all felt like a performance. A charade she was playing, thinking I was still in the dark. But I wasn't. Not anymore. As the days passed, I became more vigilant. Kelly's behavior grew more suspicious by the hour. The late-night phone calls, the texts she hid, the way she'd disappear without explanation. I started keeping a mental log of her movements, every suspicious glance, every hurried exit. Each new inconsistency was another piece of the puzzle, and soon I knew it would all fall into place. I just had to be patient. Suspicion had burrowed deep into my mind now, an ever-present hum in the background of my thoughts. I wasn't going to ask for answers. I was going to take them. And when I did, Kelly wouldn't know what hit her. By the time I sat back down at my desk, a sense of clarity had settled over me. I didn't know where this would lead, but one thing was certain. Kelly wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. She thought she had the upper hand. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. Kelly had always been a master at evasiveness. It's something I'd admired about her once, the way she could navigate difficult conversations with grace, deflecting tension without making anyone feel uncomfortable. But now it was suffocating me. Every time I tried to confront her, she would dismiss me, laughing off my questions or shifting the conversation to something trivial. "You're working too hard, Ethan," she'd say with a light chuckle, brushing off my concerns as if they were absurd. "You're imagining things. You need to relax." Relax, that word used to mean something different. It used to mean unwinding with Kelly after a long day, talking about our lives, our plans for the future. Now it meant her trying to silence the growing storm inside me. She was good at it too. Each time I'd start to press, she'd find a way to make me feel ridiculous for even asking. But it wasn't just her words anymore. It was everything else. Her guarded phone, her late-night disappearances, the little comments she made that felt too rehearsed, too perfect. She was hiding something, and no amount of laughing it off could cover that up. I'd always had a firm grip on my world, on my life. Now it felt like that control was slipping through my fingers, slowly but surely. I was spiraling, questioning every detail, every moment that had seemed normal just days before. And in her presence, I could feel that strain between us growing, a chasm widening with each evasion, each flippant remark. I watched her more closely after that night with the laptop. Every time she picked up her phone, I tried to see her expression, tried to gauge her mood. Was she anxious? Did she seem more at ease when she thought I wasn't looking? I became a silent observer, collecting data on my own wife, hunting for cracks in her carefully crafted facade. There was no confrontation yet, not until I had more. I wasn't about to make accusations without the full picture, without undeniable proof. I had to stay calm, stay patient, but every second of pretending nothing was wrong gnawed at me. One night, while she was in the shower, I took her phone. My heart was racing, hands shaking as I unlocked it. She hadn't bothered to change her passcode. That should have been comforting, but it wasn't. It just made me wonder how much further she was willing to go, how secure she felt in her deception. She hadn't even thought to hide the evidence better. At first, there wasn't much, nothing that screamed affair. But that only made me more suspicious. Kelly was meticulous, always had been. If there was something to hide, she'd know how to do it. Still, I combed through her messages, her emails, looking for anything that might confirm my suspicions. I had to know the truth. I didn't find anything concrete that night. No damning texts, no clear communication with Nick. But something was still off. Why would she go through all the trouble of hiding certain folders on her laptop but leave her phone this clean? It didn't make sense. Unless we Wipumasum, she was keeping it somewhere else. Kelly had always been a tech-savvy person, smarter with computers than I was. It wouldn't surprise me if she had another device, something she used only when she was with him. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something critical, but I wasn't about to stop searching. Over the next few weeks, the tension between us became palpable. Every conversation was layered with unsaid words, things I wanted to ask but didn't. She started spending more nights out, claiming to meet with friends or attend some yoga retreat, but I knew better now. I knew that whatever she was doing, it wasn't just about yoga. I tried to act normal, going through the motions of our routine, but it was impossible to ignore the strain. She felt it too. I could see it in her eyes whenever we were alone. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me out of the corner of her eye, as if she were waiting for me to ask something, to break the silence, but I didn't. Not yet. Then one evening I noticed something different. She'd been out later than usual, coming home after midnight, slipping quietly into bed beside me. But this time she smelled different. Not just perfume, something else. Cologne. It was faint, barely there, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone else had been close to her. Someone who wasn't me. The next day I decided to check her laptop again. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Maybe more hidden emails, more folders, but what I found shook me to my core. It wasn't just messages this time. It was receipts, hotel bookings, dinners at places I'd never been with her. And they all pointed to one name, Nick. Seeing it in black and white laid out so clearly made my stomach turn. It wasn't just suspicions anymore. It was real. This wasn't something I could rationalize away, no matter how much I wanted to. She had been with him, behind my back, while she pretended everything was fine. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. How long had this been going on? What had she told him about me? I felt like my entire marriage had been a lie, a farce Kelly had maintained while plotting with someone else. I couldn't think straight. My hands were trembling, and I felt nauseous. I should have confronted her right then. But as much as I wanted to scream, to demand answers, I knew I couldn't yet. Not without understanding the full extent of her betrayal. There had to be more. I needed to know everything before I made my move. Then, as if fate were twisting the knife deeper, an email popped up in my inbox later that night. It was anonymous, no sender information, just a video attachment. I stared at it for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Something about it felt wrong, too coincidental, too perfectly timed. I clicked on the file and the video began to play. It was grainy, poor quality, but it was unmistakably me, at least it looked like me, kissing another woman at what appeared to be a work event, but I knew it wasn't real. I hadn't been at any such event. I hadn't even been in the city on the date the video claimed. This was no simple affair anymore. This was a plot to destroy me. I leaned back in my chair, my head spinning. Kelly wasn't just having an affair with Nick. They were setting me up. She was using this fake video to ruin me, probably so she could justify whatever she had planned next. Divorce, taking everything we'd built together. My career, my reputation, my dignity. It was all on the line now. The anger that had been simmering inside me turned white hot. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was calculated, vicious. She wanted to rip my life apart, piece by piece, and the worst part, she'd almost succeeded. The video was convincing, so much so that anyone outside our marriage would believe it. I could see how easily this could ruin me. The thought of it made my skin crawl, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wasn't going to sit back and watch my life crumble under their lies. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling, my mind racing with possibilities. I couldn't act impulsively, no matter how much I wanted to. If Kelly and Nick were this meticulous, I had to be smarter. I had to be one step ahead. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about reacting. This was about taking control, regaining power over my life. I needed proof, not just of the affair, but of everything. The fake video, the emails, the hotel receipts. I needed to gather every piece of evidence I could before making my move, and I couldn't do it alone. My cousin Sam, a digital forensics expert, came to mind. He owed me a favor, and I knew he'd be able to help. If anyone could trace the origins of the video, it was him. I needed him to uncover the truth before Kelly had the chance to spring whatever trap she had set for me. As I sat there in the dark, the weight of the betrayal sinking deeper into my bones, I realized something crucial. I wasn't a victim. Kelly thought she could manipulate me, ruin me, but she had underestimated who she was dealing with. I wasn't going to break. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I made the call to Sam the next morning, calm, collected. The storm inside me still raged, but I kept it under control. I told him about the video, the fake evidence, the betrayal. His response was immediate. He'd get to work on it right away. The pieces were starting to fall into place. My mind was clearing, the path ahead sharpening into focus. Kelly and Nick had made one critical mistake. They underestimated me. They thought I'd fold under the pressure. But they were wrong. I wasn't going to fold. I was going to fight back. The call to Sam was the first step, but I knew it wouldn't be the last. My cousin didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to. When I mentioned the video, he immediately understood. His background in digital forensics had made him the family's go-to guy for anything tech-related, but this was different. This wasn't about recovering a lost password or decrypting a corrupted file. This was about saving my life from the wreckage Kelly and Nick had orchestrated. "Send it over," Sam had said, his voice calm but with an edge that matched my own. I forwarded him the email with the video, every bone in my body buzzing with anger. As I waited for his response, I paced the house, trying to figure out my next move. I replayed everything in my mind, the coldness in Kelly's eyes, the calculated distance between us, and now the fake video that had landed in my lap like a ticking bomb. It wasn't just a matter of confronting her. No, that was too simple. She and Nick had woven an intricate web, one designed to ruin me from the inside out. And to fight back, I'd need to dismantle it piece by piece. The email from Sam came back quicker than I expected. "You were right, it's a deep fake. A good one, but it's sloppy in some places. Whoever made this used your face but didn't get the details right. The lighting on your neck, it doesn't match the rest of the shot. And the timestamp, it's off. I can prove it's fake. But there's more." I could practically hear Sam smirk through the phone. "It was sent from an IP address linked to a burner account. The encryption on it isn't bad, but I'll crack it. Give me a couple days and I'll know exactly where this came from." I thanked him, a surge of relief mixed with something darker, more determined. This was it, the crack in their armor. But as the hours passed, my relief turned into something else. Rage. Kelly hadn't just betrayed me physically. She and Nick had crafted a lie so detailed that it nearly destroyed my reputation. Nearly. They thought I would crumble. that I'd be too broken to fight back. I wasn't. As the next few days blurred together, Sam dug deeper into the video's origins, and I began crafting my plan. It was hard not to feel like a ticking time bomb myself. My marriage was a lie, my career teetering on the edge, and Kelly still moved around the house like nothing had changed. She had no idea I was onto her. That was my advantage. But then, like a knife to the gut, it happened. The call from my boss came mid-morning. "Ethan, I'm sorry. We've received complaints about the video circulating. We can't keep you on under these circumstances." The words hung in the air like a noose tightening around my throat. Fired. Just like that. The fake video had already spread, and people believed it. My world started to tilt. Everything I'd built, my career, my reputation, was crumbling. And it wasn't just because Kelly was sleeping with another man. She was trying to ruin me completely. I stood in my office, phone still in hand, the silence pressing down on me. Then I heard her. Kelly's voice floated from the kitchen, soft and casual, as if she hadn't just obliterated my life. She was on the phone, laughing at something I couldn't hear. Her laughter twisted my insides, bile rising in my throat. How many lies had she told while smiling at me like that? How many plans had she made with Nick while pretending to be my wife? A lesser man might have snapped right then, might have stormed into the kitchen, confronted her, screamed, raged, but not me. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd broken me. I walked out of the house without saying a word, my hands shaking with barely controlled fury. Sam's message came through just as I sat in the driver's seat, staring blankly at the steering wheel, trying to figure out my next step. Got it. The video was sent from an IP registered to Nick Larkin. Looks like he's the one who made it. I've traced the exact location, his office downtown. You want to confront him? Nick, the bastard, thought he could get away with this. Thought he could hide behind his computer, manipulate Kelly into tearing me down. I clenched my jaw, the fire in my chest blazing brighter. Confronting Nick wasn't enough. They both needed to pay. Instead of heading home, I drove to meet Rachel, an old friend who'd become one of the most cunning lawyers I knew. She had navigated divorce settlements, corporate takedowns, and more than a few messy betrayals. If anyone could help me turn the tables on Kelly and Nick, it was her. Rachel listened as I told her everything about the affair, the fake video, the plot to ruin me. Her face remained impassive as I laid it all out, but when I finished, she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. They've dug themselves in deep, Ethan, but that just means we can dig deeper. She paused, considering. We'll need to hit them on multiple fronts. This can't just be about the affair. We'll destroy their credibility, and I'll make sure Kelly gets nothing in the divorce. Financially, we're going to leave her with dust. I nodded, my mind already turning over the possibilities. And Nick? Rachel's eyes hardened. We'll need to take care of him too. Legally, I can't touch him beyond this fake video. But you're not limited to legal means, are you? I felt a grim smile tug at the corners of my mouth. Rachel was right. I wasn't bound by the law. Nick might think he was untouchable, hiding behind his screen, but he was wrong. He had no idea what was coming for him. Rachel gave me a detailed outline of the legal strategy we'd take. In the meantime, I had my own plan to set in motion. The first step was to isolate Nick. He was a tech geek, always chasing the next big opportunity. I crafted an email, an offer that would seem too good to pass up. A prestigious tech company overseas looking for a head developer, a huge salary. The kind of opportunity someone like Nick would jump at, especially if it meant getting him out of the country and far away from the mess he was creating. I sent it from a fake account, complete with all the bells and whistles, company letterhead, a plausible cover story, and enough small details to make it seem real. Nick would fall for it. I knew the type, greedy, always thinking they're one step ahead, when in reality they're two steps behind. It didn't take long. A few hours after I sent the email, Nick responded, eager and overeager, practically begging for the job. The trap was set. While Nick was busy planning his escape to this non-existent tech utopia, I started the second phase of my plan. Kelly had to be dealt with, but I wasn't going to give her a simple confrontation. No, she needed to feel the ground shift beneath her feet. She needed to lose everything. Rachel began moving on the divorce paperwork. Once it was filed, Kelly would be blindsided. I'd be taking everything from her. She wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. But I still needed more. Something to ensure that when this all came crashing down, she wouldn't just lose me. She'd lose the respect and sympathy of everyone around her. I wanted her humiliated, isolated. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, Kelly left for another one of her yoga retreats, but this time I followed her. I kept my distance, trailing her out of town, down a winding road that led to a secluded Airbnb. And there he was, Nick, waiting for her. I parked far enough away that they wouldn't notice me and watched as they greeted each other, laughing, kissing, acting like everything was normal, like they weren't conspiring to ruin my life. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I stayed calm, watching, waiting. This was what I needed. Proof of their affair, their betrayal, all laid out right in front of me. I took photos, videos, evidence that would tear down their carefully constructed facade. By the time I drove away, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused, clear. Kelly and Nick thought they'd won, but they had no idea the storm that was about to hit them. The next morning, I met with Sam. "It's time," I said, handing him the phone with the videos, the pictures. "Send these to everyone. Let them see who Kelly really is." Sam gave me a nod, and that was it. The final piece was in place. Now all I had to do was watch it unfold. Watching everything unfold was a mix of cold satisfaction and the relentless churn of my own emotions. I'd set the pieces in motion. Now it was time to let the storm do its work. Nick was my first target. His arrogance had made it easy to bait him, and now he was spiraling into the job offer I'd fabricated. I'd heard from Sam that Nick had been emailing the fake executives daily, gushing about the new position he thought he'd land. My cousin had even intercepted Nick's emails, posing as the recruiters, making sure Nick was thoroughly hooked. He was preparing to leave for an imaginary future, all the while digging his own grave. But it wasn't enough to let him self-destruct from the inside. I needed to hit him harder. One day, as Nick sat in his office, eagerly awaiting the final confirmation of his new position, I sent Sam a signal. Within minutes, Sam sent a few anonymous tips to Nick's current employer, details about Nick's interest in the competing tech company. It didn't take long for the fallout to hit. I had front row seats to the chaos, watching through the access Sam gave me into Nick's work emails. The next day, Nick was fired for breaching contract confidentiality. Just like that, the lifeline he thought he had was severed. His rage was palpable even through his emails. He had no idea that the job offer was fake, and now with no job and no way to explain why, he was panicking. I could almost hear his frantic calls to Kelly. That was when Kelly started to sense something was off. I could see it in her body language, the way her eyes flicked toward me when we were in the same room. She'd always been so confident, but now she was nervous, suspicious. I had kept my mask on perfectly, playing the role of the ignorant husband, but that mask was starting to crack, and she knew it. She began asking more questions, trying to probe me without being obvious. Her attempts at nonchalance were pitiful. "You've been so calm lately, Ethan. Is everything okay?" I could feel the smugness rising in my chest every time she said something like that, but I wasn't about to let it show. "Not yet." "Yeah," I would answer, smiling in a way that probably unnerved her. "Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. The storm I'd unleashed on them was only beginning. Kelly started staying home more, not as confident as before about her so-called yoga retreats. I'd rattled her, and she was now in damage control mode. Meanwhile, Sam was making sure the videos and pictures of Kelly and Nick were slowly leaking to the right people, mutual friends, colleagues, people who wouldn't be able to resist gossiping. We used anonymous email addresses, threw in just enough detail to make it undeniable, but not enough to trace it back to me. Soon I began hearing the whispers. Friends of ours, couples we'd had dinner with, began calling less frequently. Social media posts, pictures that once featured Kelly, were suddenly absent. Slowly but surely, her reputation was crumbling. It was then that Kelly started sensing something bigger than a simple affair had gone wrong. She caught me in the hallway one evening, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and frustration. "What's going on, Ethan? People are avoiding me. It's like they know something." She was desperate. I could see it in the way her lips trembled, in the subtle clenching of her fists. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, watch the realization shatter her from the inside out. But I wasn't done yet. I shrugged, forcing a confused expression. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Her face twisted, searching for the lie, but there wasn't anything for her to grasp. Kelly was losing control of everything, and she couldn't even figure out why. I walked away before she could press further, enjoying the sting of silence that followed. Then, just as I predicted, she broke. She began calling Nick more frequently, trying to piece together the mystery. But Nick was no help. He was busy trying to salvage his life after being fired, completely oblivious to the fact that he was the architect of his own demise. Their conversations, from what Sam had been able to track, were filled with confusion, paranoia. Kelly was losing her grip, and Nick was about to fall even harder. Rachel called me one afternoon, her voice laced with the excitement of a predator closing in on its prey. "We're ready. The divorce papers are finalized. Kelly will get it served tomorrow morning." The moment I'd been waiting for was here. That night, Kelly came home late, her steps cautious, her eyes darting toward me as if waiting for something to happen. She still had no idea what was coming. We sat down for dinner, the silence between us a fragile, trembling thing. "I need to talk to you," she finally said, her voice small, barely above a whisper. I looked up from my plate, feigning ignorance. "What about?" She hesitated, then sighed. "I think we need to talk about us. About where we're headed." I felt the smile pulling at my lips. I wanted to laugh, but I held it back. "I think we do too," I said, my tone calm, collected. But not tonight. Her face fell, confusion clouding her features. She thought she was in control, that she could lead the conversation. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Not anymore. The next morning, just as she stepped out of the shower, Kelly was served with the divorce papers. I watched from the kitchen as a look of sheer disbelief crossed her face. She stood there in her robe, clutching the papers, her eyes scanning the words in growing panic. She hadn't seen this coming. For the first time in our marriage, she had absolutely no idea what to do. "Ethan," her voice trembled, wavering on the edge of desperation. What is this?" I didn't look up from my coffee. "It's exactly what it looks like." She stumbled into the kitchen, her face down. "You can't. This is insane. You're filing for divorce?" I met her eyes, cold and steady. "What did you expect, Kelly? Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Did you think I'd just sit here while you destroyed my life?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. I could see the panic rising, the realization that everything was slipping away. "But," she started, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I cut her off. "You did. You knew exactly what you were doing." The look of pure terror on her face was more satisfying than I had imagined. She had played her cards, and she had lost. All those years of deception, the lies, the fake affection, it was all crumbling around her. She finally spoke again, her voice shaking. "We can fix this, Ethan. We can fix this, please." I shook my head slowly, savoring the moment. "There's nothing to fix, Kelly. You made sure of that." The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls, of Kelly trying to figure out how to stop the unstoppable. She didn't know that I had already taken everything from her, that Rachel had orchestrated a divorce settlement so airtight, Kelly would walk away with almost nothing. Her friends were already gone, her reputation tarnished beyond repair. Nick was next. He still hadn't pieced together the extent of the damage I'd done, but he was about to. Sam had sent one final message to Nick, posing as the executives, telling him that the company had discovered the deepfake video and that it had been flagged as suspicious. Not only was Nick not getting the fake job, but he was now being investigated for digital fraud. The silence between Kelly and Nick became deafening as they both tried to deal with their lives unraveling at the same time. And I sat back, watching, waiting for the final blow. Later that evening, I received a message from Rachel. It's done. Kelly would walk away with nothing. Nick was ruined. And me, I still had my life. My career might need rebuilding, but it wasn't gone. My reputation had taken a hit, but the truth was starting to surface, thanks to the evidence Sam had gathered. As I sat on the couch that night, sipping my drink, I felt something shift inside me. Satisfaction, maybe. Closure. The storm had passed, and I was the only one still standing. Kelly and Nick thought they could take everything from me, but in the end, they were the ones left with nothing. Nick showed up to the meeting with the fake executives, his usual cocky swagger missing. It was all over his face. He was desperate. He had fallen for the trap, hook, line, and sinker, and I could already sense the anxiety in his every step. He thought this was his chance to fix everything, a last-minute lifeline to pull him out of the chaos I'd created. But the moment he stepped into the room, I knew he realized something was wrong. He froze at the sight of me. Not the suits he expected, not the friendly tech recruiters eager to offer him a position. Just me, standing there, arms crossed, watching as his face twisted into something between confusion and dread. Sam stood behind me, leaning casually against the wall. Rachel, as always, looked composed, her cold smile the only welcome Nick was going to get. "Ethan, what the hell is this?" Nick stammered, his voice cracking. He took a step back, his eyes darting toward the door. He was already thinking about running, but it was too late. "Sit down," I said, my voice steady, leaving no room for argument. He didn't move. The seconds dragged on until Rachel broke the silence, her voice laced with venom. "I wouldn't test his patience if I were you. You have a lot to answer for." Nick swallowed hard and sank into the chair, his eyes flicking nervously between the three of us. He looked trapped, like an animal cornered with no way out. The confident, arrogant Nick I once knew was gone, replaced by this pathetic version of himself. I paced slowly, my steps deliberate. I could feel the weight of everything, the months of planning, the sleepless nights, all coming to a head. I had waited for this moment, the moment where I could finally confront him, tear down the facade he had so carefully constructed. But this wasn't just about Nick. Kelly was still the shadow looming over all of this, and she would be here soon enough. "So," I started, keeping my voice even, "you thought you could ruin me? Destroy my life with a fake video? Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Nick's eyes widened and he shifted uncomfortably. "Ethan, I don't know what you're talking about, man. I didn't—" "Don't lie to me," I snapped, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. "I have the proof, Nick. Sam traced the video back to you. You made it, you spread it. You tried to ruin me." Nick's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. His hands were trembling now, and I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. He knew there was no way out of this. I had him. Rachel spoke up, her voice sharp and professional. "Here's what's going to happen, Nick. You're going to come clean about everything. The affair with Kelly, the video, all of it. You'll do it voluntarily, or I'll make sure you face legal consequences that will make losing your job look like a walk in the park." Nick's breath quickened, and he looked at me with a mixture of fear and desperation. "Ethan, please, man, it wasn't all my idea. Kelly, she pushed for it. She wanted to destroy you. I raised a hand, silencing him. "Save it. I don't care whose idea it was. You're both guilty." Before Nick could respond, the door swung open and Kelly walked in. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw us, her face a mix of shock and disbelief. Her eyes landed on me, and for a split second I saw the mask slip, the guilt, the panic. What is this?" Kelly's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes wide as they darted from me to Nick and then to Rachel. I turned to face her, my heart pounding, but my voice remained calm. "This is the truth, Kelly. This is what you've been hiding, what you and Nick tried to do." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "Ethan, please, it's not what you think. I didn't. I stepped toward her, closing the distance between us. Don't lie to me. Don't you dare lie to me. The room was heavy with silence as Kelly stood there, her hands shaking. She looked at Nick, her expression a mix of betrayal and fear. You told him? You said you wouldn't. Nick's voice cracked as he tried to defend himself. He found out, Kelly. He traced everything back to me. What was I supposed to do? Kelly's face twisted with rage and she turned to me, her voice rising. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Ethan. I was supposed to what? Humiliate me? Take everything from me? You almost succeeded, I growled, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. But you didn't. I know everything, Kelly. The affair, the video, the Liz. I know it all. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I had once loved standing before me, broken, vulnerable. But it wasn't enough. It couldn't be. She had destroyed too much. Kelly sank into the nearest chair, burying her face in her hands. Got out of control, she whispered, her voice muffled. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was so unhappy, Ethan. I didn't know how to tell you. Unhappy. That word echoed in my mind like a bitter joke. She hadn't known how to tell me. Instead of talking to me, instead of being honest, she had conspired with Nick to destroy me. You didn't know how to tell me? I asked, my voice cold. So instead, you decided to ruin my life? You let him create a fake video, let everyone think I was the one cheating? You tried to take everything from me, Kelly. Her sobs grew louder, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity, just the weight of what she had done and the resolve that had brought me here. Rachel stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. It's over, Kelly. We have the evidence. The divorce is finalized, and you're walking away with nothing. You've lost. Kelly looked up, her face pale, her eyes red and swollen. Nothing, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You're taking everything from me. I nodded, my expression hard. Just like you tried to take everything from me. Kelly looked at me, truly seeing me for the first time in what felt like years. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was broken, defeated, and I felt nothing but the hollow satisfaction of knowing that she had finally been forced to face the truth of what she had done. Nick slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. He was finished too, but his end wasn't as quiet as Kelly's. Rachel leaned in, handing him a sheet of paper. Here's what you're going to sign, Nick. It's a full confession. Everything you did. You're going to admit to creating the fake video, to conspiring with Kelly. And if you don't, I'll make sure the legal fallout destroys whatever's left of your life. Nick looked up, his face ashen. He stared at the paper, his hands trembling as he reached for the pen. There was no fight left in him. He scribbled his name on the confession, the sound of the pen scratching against the paper, the final death knell of everything he had built with Kelly. When he was done, he looked at me, his eyes hollow. I'm sorry, Ethan, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't respond. His apology meant nothing. It couldn't undo the months of betrayal, the damage they had caused. I watched as Rachel collected the confession, tucking it away in her briefcase with a satisfied nod. That's it, she said, her voice calm. It's over. I stood there for a moment looking at the two of them, Kelly, sobbing quietly, her life in ruins, Nick, broken, his future shattered. They had tried to destroy me, but in the end, they had destroyed themselves. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, the weight of everything settling on my shoulders. It was done. I had won. But as I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I realized something I hadn't expected. The victory felt hollow. The revenge had been sweet, yes, but it had come at a cost. I wasn't the same person I had been when this started. I had lost something too, something I wasn't sure I could ever get back. The confrontation had ended, but the scars it left would linger, for all of us. I sat in my empty house, staring at the remnants of what used to be my life. The walls were the same, the furniture hadn't moved, but everything felt foreign, hollow. I had torn down the lie I had been living, exposed Kelly and Nick for what they were, but in the process, I had torn down parts of myself too. The victory was mine, legally, financially, even socially, but it didn't taste as sweet as I thought it would. I stood and walked to the window, watching the street outside, people passing by without a care. I wondered what they'd think if they knew what I'd just done. Would they understand? Would they approve? Or would they see me as the monster I felt like in moments of reflection? Kelly was gone now, left with nothing but her own wreckage to sift through. Rachel had made sure of that. The divorce had been brutal and efficient. Kelly lost the house, the accounts, and any remaining social support she might have thought she had. I'd watched as friends and acquaintances slowly drifted away from her as if her betrayal was contagious. I hadn't needed to lift a finger after the confrontation. The truth about her and Nick had spread like wildfire. Nick, too, had fallen hard. He lost his job, his reputation in the tech world shredded. Sam had made sure that every thread of his online life led back to the fake video, the malicious deep fake that he and Kelly had conspired to use against me. He had no way out. And as satisfying as it had been to watch them crumble, I felt the lingering ache in the hollow victory. What had I become to get here? I wasn't the same man who had built this life with Kelly. The person who had trusted her, who had loved her, was long gone, replaced by someone harder, someone colder. And while I'd won, I wasn't sure if the cost had been worth it. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stared at my reflection in the window. The man looking back at me was a stranger. His eyes were sharper, more calculating. His face showed lines of stress that hadn't been there before. I looked older, not just physically, but in the way that pain etches itself into your soul. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. Was this who I was now? A man defined by revenge? A man who had ripped apart his life, even if it was justified? The silence in the house was deafening. It was the kind of quiet that forced you to listen to your thoughts, whether you wanted to or not. I sat back down at the table, letting the weight of everything settle on me. It felt heavier now that the adrenaline was gone, now that there was nothing left to fight against. I thought back to Kelly's words, her final desperate plea. She'd said she was unhappy, that she didn't know how to tell me. I dismissed it at the time, but now, in the stillness, I couldn't help but wonder if there was a grain of truth in what she had said. Had I been too focused on my career? On building a life that looked perfect from the outside while we slowly crumbled inside? I'd spent so long calculating my next move, my next revenge, that I hadn't stopped to ask myself how we had gotten here in the first place. It didn't change anything. Her betrayal was unforgivable, and nothing she could have said would justify what she'd done. But I could no longer deny that maybe I hadn't seen the cracks in our marriage, that maybe I had been blind to more than just her affair. But what good was reflection now? It wouldn't change the outcome. The past was behind me, and there was nothing left to salvage. All that was left was me and the future that lay ahead. I stood up, heading toward the front door. I needed air, a break from the suffocating silence of the house. Outside, the cool evening breeze hit my face and I breathed it in, letting it clear the fog in my mind. This was my chance to rebuild. Kelly and Nick were gone, their presence erased from my life. The wreckage was behind me, and now I had a blank slate. A chance to start over, to rebuild not just my career, but myself. The thought of moving forward didn't feel as daunting as it had a few weeks ago. Back then, I had been consumed by anger, blinded by the need for revenge. But now that it was over, I could see that I wasn't as lost as I had thought. The anger had burned away something in me, but it hadn't destroyed me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I hesitated when I landed on Sam's name. He had been instrumental in all of this, but he had also seen sides of me that I wasn't sure I wanted to acknowledge. Instead, I called Rachel. "Ethan," she answered, her voice calm as always. "I wanted to thank you," I said, pausing to let the words settle, "for everything." "You don't need to thank me," she replied. "You did what you had to do. You took control." "I guess," I said, the weight of those words heavier than I'd expected. "But I don't know what comes next." Rachel was silent for a moment, then spoke softly. What comes next is up to you. You've closed this chapter, but you get to decide how the next one starts. That struck me. I had been so focused on ending things, on destroying the lies and the betrayal, that I hadn't thought about what would come after. But Rachel was right. I had the power to shape what came next. Thanks, I said again, meaning it this time. I appreciate everything. She said a quiet goodbye, and I hung up, pocketing the phone. I stood there on the sidewalk for a long time, staring up at the sky, watching the stars flicker to life. For the first time in months, I felt a small sense of peace. I wasn't the same person I had been before all this, but maybe that was okay. Maybe I didn't need to be. The scars would remain, reminders of what I had gone through, of the betrayal and the revenge that had consumed me. But those scars didn't have to define me. I walked back inside, closing the door softly behind me. The house was still quiet, but it didn't feel as suffocating anymore. I had spent too long trapped in the past, in the bitterness and anger, and now I could feel something shift. I wasn't free yet. Not completely, but I was getting there. As I sat down at the table again, I felt the weight on my shoulders lift. Just a little. I had faced the worst of it. Kelly and Nick were nothing more than ghosts now, shadows of a life I had left behind, and I wasn't haunted by them anymore. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, that didn't scare me. I was ready for it. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that I had survived the storm. The scars would heal, slowly perhaps, but they would heal, and in their place, I would build something new, something stronger. Something that couldn't be torn down by lies or betrayal. The wreckage was behind me, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to move forward.